So my name is Maria Kozak. I'm an artist living in New York City, and today I'm going to talk to you about the art of the pivot. And this will be more on a personal level, less business, so less about strategy and adjusting, and more about how to deal with uncertainty. So I'm an artist, I'm a painter, and I work in virtual reality. I'm also an art director. So I work freelance a lot, and I've had a lot of experience not knowing where my next project is going to come from, what I'm doing, in a few months. So I'm pretty comfortable knowing that. And right now, a lot of my friends are struggling because their whole lives have just changed at the drop of the hat and maybe haven't practiced. So I thought I would just share a couple tips on how to do this. So a little bit about what I was just working on. So my partner and I'm at New Inc., which is the New Museum Incubator for Art and Technology right now. And my partner and I were working on a VR experience with the researcher at Johns Hopkins called The Sneaky Green. You can see our little cast of characters. I don't have my VR computer here, but it was basically an experience for hospitals to use with their patients and to give them a way to reduce anxiety and cope with the stresses of treatment and being in the hospital. And we were supposed to go to Johns Hopkins and like a week ago, present and start, our demo and our pilot. And of course, everything got canceled. All of, any other VR I've been working on has been put on hold because as an artist, when making art installations, they really rely on crowds and showing them in galleries or museums or film festivals. And while, VR is going to have a tremendous impact, I think, on like home viewing and game, for art, it's been a bit of a pivot. So the thing that helps the most and what I've been kind of working on for a long time is acceptance. And what comes with this is one of my early paintings and my first VR experience that I made. It was called There's No Rushing a River. And I've noticed a lot of people sharing river metaphors. I think there's a really good Bruce Lee one going around about how, you want to be like the water and you want to flow through all the crevices. I also love, don't swim upstream, let the river take you, but also you don't want to like completely give up control. You want to be a ship and, steal the rudder. But this sort of practice of, non-attachment is really, I think, what, helps when you're dealing with uncertainty, not wanting anything too badly, and learning how to be okay with whatever. And, obviously this takes years of practice and is not something that you can cultivate right away. But there are a couple tips to help you do this. I like to think about controlling versus creating. When you're controlling life, you're attached too much to your plan. You kind of fight against what is unwanted. But when you're creating, you allow both wanted and unwanted things into your life because you think about them as clay and you learn to use them to your advantage. And you can be at peace that way. And you see these things as like, just scratches or gifts, or that idea like in Japanese pottery where if you break the bowl, you can put it back together with gold. And so I try to think about things in that sort of sense, like how can you use the cracks? This is probably the first sort of thing to do when you panic, is to think about the worst case scenario. This is a really old painting of mine. As you can see, my work has also really changed too in response to the times, but I like to think about like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And, usually it's death, or, your boyfriend breaks up with you, or, you lose your job and you have no money and you have to move back in with your parents, or, like barring, I joke about death and COVID and all these things, but, aside from your health and being unhealthy, usually your worst, and, as I'm speaking to, a bunch of privileged kids with computers and Zoom, usually a worst case scenario isn't that bad. So that's really helped. Another thing that really helps with that before we go to the next one is gratitude. Also, when you're grateful for all the things that you have, it makes it seem not so bad. And then presence. Presence is a really big one for me. It's my meditational practice too. I just like to think about or to take a moment and, try to be as present as possible, to feel the ground, to see, like hear the sounds, to breathe the air, feel it on my skin, smell the smells, and as long as you just sit in a space of feeling everything around you. A lot of my work is about presence. These are some VR pieces about how, like the one on the right is how things build up around when you're not paying attention. And so I think being present to what is happening immediately in front of you is a really good way to handle uncertainty, because when you're just focused on what's immediately in front of you, it's like there isn't a war going on over there. Like you're usually in an okay place. Like usually have some food, you have, whatever is in front of you is usually not as bad. Everything negative is happening in your thoughts and not in your immediate vicinity. So focusing on that kind of helps with that. Here's some more work, but we'll skip that one. Okay, so pivoting really is just having a plan B and thinking about all the different plans that things you could do otherwise. And it also, to me, it really means what will make you happiest in this moment. So, and what do you enjoy doing the most? And if you could do anything, what would you be doing right now? And, instead of what you think you should be doing. So for me, when all my work dried up, when our VR, everything changed, I actually went back to painting, which is something I hadn't really done in a couple years. Seriously, this is my little studio, and it's really small. I'm upstate, and I'm still very uncertain with like what to do next and where I'm gonna go, but if I am just present and making these little weird things in the studio, nothing seems so bad. So that's all I really have for you guys. If anyone has any questions, or Anthony, you want to finish?
I have a question.
Yes.
Has the experience changed over the course of the lockdown for you?
It has, and it was, I kind of went through those. I was trying to think of like what the steps were, but that was it. It was like when everything kind of crumbled, it was like, okay, well, what's the, it was full of anxiety. Like, what am I going to do next? What was the worst case? Like, and I think the first 2 weeks, I was unsure. I'm upstate, so I spend a lot of time farming and being present and seeing what was in front of me, and then I could finally create again. So it kind of went from a time of anxiety to a time of creation. And
amazing.
Hey.
I have a question too. Hey, Maria. So I think for me, it's so I try and be the eternal optimist, and one of the things I like about being inside is that we can actually spend, or not inside if we have the luxury to be inside, is to actually spend time doing things that we weren't ordinarily doing. So I actually did a whole tour of the Dali Museum in Florida from my laptop yesterday night with a glass of wines, because like I could do that sitting here in New York. And then, so that's my one question, like, how do you see art kind of changing and transcending and meeting people where they are, which is inside their apartments for most people? And then number two, VR, why isn't it having a bigger moment? Like, I would just think that like, this is the time for VR, we're sitting inside. So like, why, I mean, aside from the headsets and the cost and all that, like, why else do you think, like, is it because we can actually literally be doing 50 things on our headset? Why do you think that's not happening?
I think it is the cost. I think because we don't have a mass adoption of headsets yet. You know, if you think about where we are in, like if you're thinking about cell phones in the 90s, how they had that big, giant, clunky cell phone that only, you know, a few rich people had. You know, I think that's where we are with VR. And, you know, like now, you know, Oculus is coming out with like a really cheap version here, I think this year. And you know, as it becomes more cheaper and more readily available, I think it'll have a big moment. But, you know, unfortunately, this happened before we had that mass adoption. So I think it's still limited. But there are, you know, there is a lot happening in terms of like what you were talking about, like the virtual museums and virtual spaces. And I think that's exactly right. It's like, I feel like art is having this strange resurgence with viewing rooms and like, you know, these art fairs like Freeze that are so expensive, you know, it's like $50 to go, are now free online. And, you know, it's not the same, but you're still getting all this work that was maybe unavailable before. And then I was thinking it's really cute that all the kids are trying to recreate the paintings. Lately, you've seen that going around, but I feel like more art has been shared on Facebook and Instagram by like the masses than, you know, maybe ever with all of that. So,
Maria, what do you think? Because obviously, like the hardware adoption is a big limit to VR being sort of ubiquitous. What do you think will be the kind of killer app virtual experience that will get people to embrace the technology once we get over the hump of the hardware being a limitation? Like what kind of experience, right? Because like augmented reality, for example, existed for a really long time, and people like came up with all these different ways to use it, but no one really used it. And then Pokemon Go came out, and it was like this kind of combination of, it's like there's, you know, this whole catch 'em all mentality. There was like a game mechanic everyone was really familiar with, but then you could put it in a physical world. And so like everyone was like, oh, augmented reality makes sense now. I'm gonna like actually do this. So what do you think the VR version of that could be?
So I think for VR, I mean, VR chat is having a strong moment, but I don't think it's going to be an experience. I think for VR, it's going to be, it'll be more like a computer where people didn't have personal computers before. They were adopted in schools. So I think that when schools begin using VR as an educational tool and kids are gonna start being required to have a headset, then it's really gonna have a mass adoption.
Oh, that's cool.
All right, I think that's my time.
You did a lot better than I did.
No, I'm glad you went over because it was better to be fast.
Well, I apologize again.
Well, thank you, everyone. It was nice
Thank
to
you,
see
Maria.
you.
That was awesome.
See you in Natalie's.
Yeah.
Plug for Natalie, talking about the AI of digital humans. I think room 5.
I'm going to go there right now.
Me too.
You there?